Clark, who does such an awesome job. And looking at last night's football game, maybe no surprise, but Carson Wentz, if you didn't think he was the real deal or you weren't familiar with the school he came from, I'll give you that one. But boy, oh boy, he put on a show last night. And we go to the Talk of Fame.
Clark Judge.
And go to our good friend Clark Judge this morning. How you doing, buddy?
Not real good, guys.
Not good.
Yankees are out of the World Series. Hats are in the jar. Dartmouth College lost its first game last week to unbeaten Columbia. It's a mess here.
Boy, I got to tell you, and the amount of Dartmouth fans that I run into on a daily basis, I feel your pain, Clark. I feel your pain. And
yeah, there are legions of us everywhere. Yeah, in fact, I can count 2 or 3 in this neighborhood. Yeah, legions of them.
Now, and am I also to understand that Hank Steinbrenner is lukewarm on bringing back Girardi and Cashman as a team? Is this true?
No, I don't think so. I mean, listen, I lived in New York for a long time and in and around that place, and I get the Post every day, which I think is a great sports section, and I know guys who cover that team, and their feeling is that he wants both back, especially Cashman. But with Girardi, it's really more Girardi's decision. It seems as if Girardi may have just tired of New York. I mean, he may just say, "I've had enough of guys like me," who 2 weeks ago said, "I want him fired." And now I'm saying he's a genius. No, I think it's Girardi's decision. I think Cashman will be back, but Girardi may just say, "Listen, I'm tired of the BS. The second guessing. It's a tough town to win in." But the fact of the matter is, it is a tough town to win in. But you're going to have to do it. Otherwise, you move on. And Joe Torre was terrific there. Girardi's had his ups and downs. I'm not a big fan. I never have been. But, you look at his tenure, 10 years there, and he's won one World Series. And honestly, I know in some places you go, that's great. I mean, they're in the playoffs some. It used to be a lot. But they haven't had a losing season in his tenure. That's great, except the standard there is much higher. And when I covered the 49ers, it's the same thing. The standard was Super Bowl or else, and the standard here is like World Series, and they've only been to one. They won in 2009. So I still think, he would like to have him back, but again, it's probably up to Girardi, and if he leaves, he'll get hired in a heartbeat by somebody else.
Yeah, that's what Dave said earlier on. He said, that guy's going to write his own ticket. For someone that has his current resume, I don't see why he wouldn't. But look, I want to move on to last night's, because I can't believe we're talking about Thursday night games and Monday night football games that are good. Mm-hmm. Because
that's right.
We've gone through a lot of that's not. And I look at Carson Wentz, and the one thing that strikes me, and, he is a football player. And people say, yeah, well, of course he's a football player, but he plays like a football player. And the only thing that concerns me about that is guys who are that ultra competitive at that position. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they don't last a long time. And even though he got out of that one situation where he runs for 17 yards, it's still, I don't know, was a hook slide at the end. Sometimes because he's not afraid of contact. I just wonder, is there ever a concern with a guy who plays like that you may not get all you could in terms of longevity because of how he plays?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I mean, that's why we have pocket passers. They developed the pocket for a reason. And it wasn't to take away the running game of an RG3 or a Cam Newton or a Michael Vick. It wasn't to do that. It's to protect the quarterback. You protect him with offensive linemen and running backs and tight ends as blockers. That's why you do it, to protect this guy. Once you get outside the pocket, anything goes. And we saw it with RG3. You're starting to see it with Cam Newton. He was built like a linebacker, and people said, God, he can run over people. Well, eventually those hits take their toll. They're taking their toll on him. I covered Steve Young, who was one of the greatest running backs as a quarterback that I've ever seen. He's also a terrific quarterback. But late in his career, the coaching staff, Steve Mariucci, came in there and said, listen, you got to run out of bounds. You can't do this anymore. And he suffered concussions, and several of them that caused him to leave the game. So I agree with you. With Carson Wentz, you look at who was the leading rusher last night for Philadelphia. It was Carson Wentz. Mm-hmm. And you can't continue to do that without eventually suffering some kind of repercussion. And sometimes it's an injury will set you back a game or two. Sometimes it's a season-ending injury, and sometimes, as in the case of RG3, it's an injury which is a career-threatening or career-ending injury. And that's why you try to get these guys to stay in the pocket. Listen, Philadelphia's had experience with this before. When Donovan McNabb first came up, he was a running back as well as a quarterback. But Andy Reid told him, you've got to stay in the pocket to prolong your career. And eventually he did. He became a very good pocket passer, and we know what happened there. They went to 4 conference championship games in 4 years, 5 in 8 years. They went to a Super Bowl. He was very successful there, and Carson Wentz is going to have to learn that too, but I sure hope he doesn't learn it the hard way.
We're in conversation with Clark Judge from the Talk of Fame Network here on Raw Mike Richards. Clark, are you buying the Eagles right now as a 6-1 team that will compete in the playoffs and maybe win a division or do something, or is it still too early and you're not quite sure about whether or not the 6-1 record is real?
No, I'm buying them because I have no choice, really. I mean, who else is 6-1? Nobody. They're the only team that's lost one game. They're at the top of the heap. And you look at their schedule, guys, and it's not that difficult. Well, look at the schedule. It's really not that difficult. And I think they still have the majority of their games at home. So it all is tilting in the right direction for them. Now, I mean, you mentioned Carson Wentz. What happens if he were to get hurt? Uh-oh. I mean, that changes things. And that's why, yeah, I mean, I'm buying him right now, but it's too early to make predictions about anyone just because of injuries. Injuries determine so much in this game. And I remember years ago, a PR director saying to me, listen, it's not necessarily the best teams that get to the Super Bowls. It's sometimes the healthiest. And I think he's absolutely right. We've seen that some in the past. And I look at Philadelphia, and they've got the ammunition certainly on offense. I don't know defensively, or they're the team that you want to buy, as the best in the NFC, except I'd look at the NFC and say, who else are you going to give me? I can't give you the second best team out there. Who is it? Is it Seattle? Is it the Rams? It's not Atlanta.
Yeah.
Carolina? No. I mean, where's the second best team in the NFC? It's wide open, but we've got a long, long way to go. So let's let this thing play out.
Let's take a look at that Sunday night game, kind of reflecting back on it. There didn't seem to be any pushback from Atlanta. I know a lot of people thought, revenge game or some sort of effort that was a little more, but it almost seemed like they continued off where they left that Super Bowl late in the game and scoring 7 points, and that those 7 points were scored late in the game. Is there a chance this team, and it's kind of hard to believe that I'm saying this, but is there a chance this team does not even qualify for the postseason, especially how they're playing right now in some of these bigger games?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you might have said that even before the season began, knowing what you did about last year and how good they were last year, but also knowing history. I was a history major at Dartmouth. That's what I loved about it. I loved history, and one of the reasons I love about it is you learn from the past, and if there are mistakes that are made, you correct them. And one thing we've learned from the past in the NFL is Super Bowl losers tend to have Super Bowl hangovers. There's a Super Bowl curse with them. They struggle to get back to the playoffs, and when they do, they generally go away pretty quickly. And if you look at the recent history, it's bad. I mean, it's really bad with Super Bowl losers. And there was a time during, I think, the mid-2000s, like 8, 9, 10, right in there, where the Super Bowl losers weren't even getting back to the playoffs. And I looked at Atlanta, I said, I don't think they're going to win this division. I don't know who is, but my pick at that point, and this was probably June and July, I said, look at Tampa Bay. They're loading up.
Mm-hmm.
I look at Tampa Bay now. They can't play defense. They got 7 sacks, the last in the league in sacks. They can't play defense. And I think the quarterback's okay. I'm not a big fan of his. He makes plays, but he makes big mistakes too. I look at Tampa, and you guys saw them in Buffalo last weekend. They're not very good. Carolina's not very good. Who is good in that division? New Orleans? I'm not buying New Orleans either. So I just don't. I've never been a big fan of the Super Bowl loser just because I do believe in history, and I do think there's something there. And they spend all the offseason, answering questions from people like me. And we talked to Dan Quinn and we talked to Matt Ryan on our Talk of Fame Sports Network and asked them about it. And they would say, oh, yeah, we recognize it, but we're going to address it. We're going to work very hard to overcome it. We're going to be a great team. Well, they are working very hard, but they're not overcoming it. And you saw that on Sunday. That looked like a flat team. That the finger pointing is going to begin, and probably already has begun, at Steve Sarkisian, the offensive coordinator. They just don't seem to be playing with any urgency. There's no imagination on offense. It just looks like a different team, and Matt Ryan looks like a different quarterback. Someone's going to win that division, but I'm going to tell you right now, guys, I don't know who it is. And what I've seen so far, of those 4 teams, there's not one that's a Super Bowl threat.
We're in conversation with Clark Judge here on rawmike.richards.com. Those of you who are watching right now on YouTube or, of course, on rawmike.richards.com itself, brought to you by DKI Canada. does Sean McVeigh get a lot of love around the league? Because, it just seems like if I'm looking at the roster that the Rams have, which was not that dissimilar to the one that Jeff Fisher had, do people make that that necessarily that comparison to, okay, basically the same roster? Is really Sean McVeigh doing something different than Jeff Fisher did not? What is that argument? What does that hold?
Well, I mean, Sean McVay comes from the opposite side of the ball than Jeff Fisher, and that's where a lot of the credit goes here. Is a completely different set of eyes. He knows how to handle quarterbacks. He's young. He's so young. I covered his grandfather, John McVay.
Right.
I loved dearly. He was involved with the 49ers, did a great job with the 49ers. But Sean's young. He has a completely different approach. He seems to connect with the quarterback, who is the foundation of that team. I mean, you can build that team around him, but you can also build around Todd Gurley. And to me, I've always said, I don't think the difference is so much with Goff, and he's playing well, as it is with Gurley. Suddenly you look at Todd Gurley, and he looks like the second coming of Marshall Faulk to me. I mean, he's running, he's catching the ball in the backfield, he's blocking, he's doing everything you want. And for my money, he's the best running back in the game, the most complete. I know there are lots of very, very good ones. The year of the running back, and there are lots of very good ones. I mean, Jacksonville's got a very good young one, Leonard Fournette. You talk about Kareem Hunt in Kansas City. They're good, very good running backs everywhere. But this guy is really making things happen, and he didn't a year ago. And honestly, a year ago, they looked flat. They looked dead. They were a defensive team that tried to play without a quarterback, without a running back, without an offense. But I will say, in the defense of Jeff Fisher, is that they have added some elements, and the elements are all on offense. Andrew Whitworth comes in. They bring in John Sullivan at center. That's a huge deal. You bring in two offensive linemen who secure that offensive line. You go out and you get wide receivers. Robert Woods, you get him. You get guys who can stretch the field. Sammy Watkins. I mean, suddenly you've got playmakers where you didn't have them before. That's so much better for a quarterback, and a young quarterback like Jared Goff. He didn't have that a year ago. He didn't have that offensive line a year ago. They stunk. And now they're putting tons of points on the board. So I think it's a combination of both. They've got better players, but they've got a better head coach.
Clark, in a bit, I do a segment called The Hateful Eight, where I kind of go through a list of teams that kind of blew
Montreal,
it for me.
Gary Price.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That I'm sure that's going to happen too. It probably is.
So I'll tease this segment a little bit by saying the Cincinnati Bengals and the effort in the second half, that was kind of disappointing to me, where I thought, okay, I don't expect the Bengals to go into Pittsburgh and win, all the time, or at least half the time, to tell you the honest truth. But when they played such a decent first half and then completely no-showed in the second half, that was a real truth teller to me in what that season has been for the Bengals so far.
Couldn't agree with you more, because I thought that second half was their chance to make a statement.
Yeah.
They've been playing very well since changing offensive coordinators. In the first half, they're trading touchdowns with Pittsburgh. And in the second half, I go, okay, Pittsburgh's up, but they're getting field goals. And you can come back on them now. They're making it clear, we can't close the drive. We can't close these drives. You can beat us if you can score. And they couldn't. And they had one first down in the second half, 19 total yards, 4 sacks. I mean, how does that happen? Pittsburgh played very good defense. There's no question about that. And Pittsburgh now is, I think I mentioned to you guys last week, the AFC, which, seems to be sort of a random crapshoot right now, guaranteed in the end, the old standby is going to be there. Kansas City, Pittsburgh, New England, they're going to be there. AFC South doesn't make any difference who comes out of there. Doesn't matter. They're not going to do anything. But these guys are. And Pittsburgh right now is getting on a roll, and they played very well in the second half. But I do think Cincinnati contributed to it. There was no sense of urgency. They didn't play very well. The play calling wasn't sharp. They couldn't find the end zone with a Sherpa, for God's sake. So GPS, I mean, they really struggled there, and I think you nailed it, because I thought that was their opportunity to take care of Pittsburgh. And I did think they could win there. I really did. I mean, Roethlisberger was 8-5 against them at home, and that wasn't all that good. And I've seen them beat them there. And now this is their chance, because they're beginning to get something here. Dalton didn't have any touchdown passes in the first 2 games. Heck, they hadn't even scored a touchdown in the first 2 games. He had 7 in the next 3, and you go, whoa, here they come, 2 touchdowns in the first half. This is going to be a shootout in the second. And they just went away. And I was disappointed. I thought they did make a statement. The statement was, we're number 3 and we love it. Or maybe Baltimore's number 3, but we're not playing for the championship in this division.
Do we have any prognosis at all, Clark, on Teddy Bridgewater? Are we not seeing him this year? Is it what's
I don't think so.
No?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, you know, I in terms of, I'm not inside that building. I don't know, but I've talked to Rick Spielman over the past year and talked to him about him, and he's just such a long way away. I mean, you know, until now he hadn't practiced since August 2016. He hadn't practiced, so he's been sidelined for, you know, over a year. Hasn't been in the game, and I think if you're Minnesota, don't look at Teddy Bridgewater as a salvation. Look at your defense as a salvation. Can defenses win championships? Yeah, they can. The 2000 Ravens did it to a degree. That the 2002 Bucks did it, but I'd take Brad Johnson over anything that Minnesota's got right now. And that's not a knock at Case Keenum. I mean, Brad Johnson's a pretty good quarterback, but I'm not sure he can go very far with Case Keenum, but you can. He's not turning the ball over. Not doing that right now, and you can win with that defense. That said, I still don't think they're the team to beat in that division. I think Detroit is. Detroit's got a very difficult game this weekend. I mean, they're at home, and I think they're at home against Pittsburgh, guys.
Yes.
And that, to me, is going to be a telltale game.
Well, I don't want to end on a sad note, but are we going to talk about the Montreal Canadiens? I mean,
No, absolutely not. No, that's just something. I mean, I'm turning Cam Newton on you. I'm not even showing up for the interview.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. But nicely done. Or is this a Marshawn Lynch too? I mean, is that when you just don't show?
Yeah. I'm going to go and sit in the stands and watch the second half of the season there. I mean, it's funny. We get center ice, and my wife said, you know, okay, should I sign you up for center ice? I said, yeah, I think so. Let me see how this plays out. And I did see a couple games and went, God almighty, what are we looking at? I mean, don't you have to play with a back line? I mean, these guys, boy, they look terrible. But I mean, am I off the bandwagon? No, I love that Habs, always will. But boy, it's tough to look at. And yet, as I said to you last time, you know what? It didn't work with the Jackrabbit start last year. So a couple years before, that didn't work. No, we're going to go with the tortoise start now and see if we can get to the finish line just by taking our time and waiting everybody else out, because the other hasn't seemed to work. But right now, boys, these guys aren't real good.
No. And I was going to hear some.
And your team is, by the way. Toronto. Boy, they're fun to watch.
I'm trying to play some traditional French Canadian music too, and that didn't work either. That's just horrible.
That's okay.
They honestly don't.
Like, go Habs, go, go away, go away.
Here's their music. Hey, Clark, you take care. Thanks so much for joining us again this morning. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
That is Clark Judge joining us. Talk of Fame Network.
He is fantastic. He's a great NFL insider, and we're happy to have him most Tuesdays recapping the week that was. And, Clark Judge, Talk of Fame Network. Definitely check it out.
What? We just become best friends? Yep.